If everybody could sit down and quiet, we're going to start the meeting. Okay. Chair Bowles, we're ready to begin.
Good evening and welcome. We're happy to have you here. I now call the meeting of the regular Community Relations Commission to order. I invite everybody to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. And may I ask staff to please call the roll?
Yes, Chair Bowles.
Here.
Vice Chair Fitzgerald.
Here.
Commissioner Crowell. Commissioner Nugent. Here. And Commissioner Kim.
Here.
So tonight's meeting will be available in English and Spanish. For those attending Spanish, please choose interpretation from the menu at the bottom of your screen. For those attending the meeting live, we'll invite our interpreter team to come up and give a quick introduction now. Please join us at the podium.
Thank you. Through the chair. Good evening, commissioners and all city staff and members of the public. Victor Hernandez with On Point Language Solutions. We are going to be providing Spanish interpretation via Zoom and on-site. Muy buenas noches. Con permiso de la presidente aquí de la reunión y todos los miembros comisionadores, miembros del público, buenas noches, Víctor Hernández. Le queremos dejar saber que vamos a ofrecer interpretación simultáneamente tanto en virtual como presencial. Y si necesitan su traducción, su equipo de traducción, por favor vean a mi compañero Ron, que está allá atrás, mi colega, que les puede dar un aparatito. Muchas gracias. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you, Ron. So we are excited to be here in person with options for those who choose not to be in person to participate virtually. There are several ways to participate. For those attending in person, please complete a yellow request to speak slip found in the front and the back, and please hand it to Rachel, our city staff. If participating remotely, use the raise your hand feature in Zoom, and you'll be called on at the appropriate time. If calling in via phone, press *9 to raise your hand, and when called upon, press *6 to unmute. These options for public comment will remain available until I close the public comment period for each specific item. At this time, if I may ask Rachel to please read the consent calendar.
Yes, the consent calendar approval of the minutes. Approve the minutes of the November 20th, 2024 regular meeting.
Thank you, Rachel. Is there any member of the commission who would like to pull an item from the consent calendar? Seeing none? Okay, so at this time, we're going to go ahead and look for approval of minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes of the November 20th, 2024 regular meeting? Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, and then Chair Bowles, we don't have any, we need to ask for public commenters as well. So if anybody wanted to comment on the minutes, please give me a yellow speaker slip, or if you're on Zoom, raise your hand at this time. Okay, and then Chair Bowles, we don't have any public commenters, so we can go ahead with the vote.
Okay,
Okay, so Chair Bowles,
yes.
Vice Chair Fitzgerald,
Yes.
Commissioner Crowell, Commissioner Nugent, and Commissioner Kim.
Yes.
Okay, so next on the agenda is public comment. So members of the public wishing to comment on any item not appearing on the agenda may address the commission at this time. State law prevents commission from taking action on any matter not on the agenda. Your comments may be referred to staff for follow-up. This public comment section is generally limited to a total of 15 minutes. However, that is subject to commission's discretion and can be extended if commission wishes to do so. If needed, an opportunity for additional public comment may also be provided later in the agenda. So may I ask Rachel if you can please total the number of requests to speak on the general public comment?
Chair Bowles, right now we don't have any requests to speak for general public comment. The public comment section for the tenant protections is going to be later in the agenda.
Perfect. Thank you, Rachel. So we close the public comment period then for now and on to new business. So item 2 is the second community workshop on anti-displacement and tenant protection policies. So like with the prior workshop that was held in our previous commission meeting, November of last year, our staff will make a presentation and then we'll open it up for public comments. So again, just a quick reminder, if you wish to make a comment, please fill out the yellow request to speak form found in the front and the back, and please give it to Rachel, our city staff. If you're on Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to staff for their presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending in today's Community Relations Commission meeting. Today, we'll be discussing anti-displacement and tenant protections community workshop. This will be our second workshop. And for today's agenda, we'll be going over the background on the housing element community outreach that we have conducted to date, what we have heard, and we'll also go over state and local protections, community feedback, and next steps. The main reason we are discussing about anti-displacement and tenant protections is due to the housing element that was adopted in 2024. We organized our goals to address housing issues in 5 goals using the 3-piece framework: production, preservation, protection, as well as promotion of community engagement and public outreach, and lastly, affirmatively furthering fair housing. We have identified 3 policies to address anti-displacement and tenant protections. Out of the 3 policies, 2 falls under our 3rd goal of protection of current residents to prevent displacement, and lastly, our 5th goal to affirmatively further housing. So to go more in depth on these 3 policies, we have policy H 3.4 and H 5.4.1 to expand tenant protections in local ordinance. We are looking to extend provisions to require tenant relocation payments for no-fault evictions for those with tenure less than 1 year. We'll be soon making recommendations to the City Council to establish tenant protection policies. And we're also looking to amend the code to strengthen enforcement penalty structures for unsafe and substandard units. We're looking to also conduct outreach to the community on a biannual basis, which we're conducting right now. And our policy number 3.6, we're looking to monitor rental rates, evictions, and tenant displacement citywide. So we're researching options that other jurisdictions have implemented for a rental registry list. We're also looking to collaborate with regional partners such as 21 Elements or ABAG to further find data that is currently available on current tenant and displacement trends. And for these three policies, we're looking to implement these between 2024 and 2026. So now I'll be passing it on to Rachel, who will be going over legal service provider meetings.
Thank you, Jennifer. Good evening, commissioners and members of the public. When we embarked on implementation of what is in our housing element, which Jennifer just reviewed, we developed a community outreach plan leading us towards a city council study session in March. So the first step we took was to meet with legal service providers. These service providers work directly with members of the San Mateo community. Their clients are here. They also may operate regionally or at the state level. The city partners with some of them. The city funds one of them with its CDBG community funding program. And they provide a range of services: landlord-tenant mediation or dispute resolution, assisting tenants facing habitability issues, difficulty paying rent, tenants who are facing eviction proceedings or who are at high risk of eviction. We talk to them as part of our fact-finding to scope the problem, to understand what we need to address with these anti-displacement policies. So what did we ask for? We asked for data on evictions, the number of evictions, the type of evictions in the last year and in the last 5 years, to see what trends have emerged, whether they are seeing, these legal service providers are seeing tenants who are in smaller complexes or large multifamily complexes, whether these issues are tied to a specific housing type or correlated with a specific housing type, whether certain racial and ethnic groups are disproportionately represented among their clients. We also asked about their professional opinions on a rent registry, working in jurisdictions that have a rent registry, how that has impacted their work or how they have seen that impact displacement in one direction or another. And we also asked about their professional experience with tenant protections in the jurisdictions that they work in, and any other data that could help us with this process. So what did we learn? Key takeaways were that, key takeaways, I don't have them all memorized, was that there has been an overall increase in demand for legal services, 68% over the 5-year period, 2018 to 2023. Specifically, non-payment of rent cases have more than doubled since 2018, and unlawful detainers have also increased, not as much, in the last year. This tells us the primary driver of displacement is difficulty paying rent. The majority of evictions include financial difficulty, a financial setback, an inability to pay. This is coupled, of course, with ever increasing rents. We heard also that AB 1482, which we will discuss later, has played an important role in anti-displacement, but not everyone is knowledgeable of the law on both tenant and landlord side. We heard that jurisdictions who have local ordinances that expand on AB 1482 protections specifically saw decreases in eviction cases due to substantial renovation. We also heard that tenants who are living in units that are exempt from AB 1482, those cases have continued to increase. And then finally, we heard that tenants who are Section 8 voucher holders or who are in BMR, below market rate units, are the most vulnerable, according to these providers, to rent increases. This is intuitive because these are going to be or extremely low-income members of the community. Of course, the most vulnerable are those who have no protections at all, no voucher, and aren't living in a BMR unit. But we understand that those who are going to be most vulnerable are those who are struggling with their income. So next slide, please. We followed up these meetings with the first large public meeting for community input, the November 20th community workshop hosted by the Community Relations Commission. We received a range of comments at this meeting from all members of the public like this evening. Here I'm going to touch on just a summary of the types of comments we received. Overall concern about displacement, concerns about the high cost of living, overcrowding to compensate for that high cost of living. We heard support for more protections against unsafe living conditions, habitability issues such as mold or pests. We heard support for improved tenant and landlord education on the law. We heard support for a city rental assistance program. We heard support for and opposition to a rental registry. And we heard concerns about the risk to mom and pop or smaller landlords from expanded tenant protections beyond what is in AB 1482. Next slide, please. Directly following the November 20th meeting, we invited organizations throughout San Mateo, stakeholder organizations, meaning organizations that work with clients in San Mateo, advocacy organizations, organizations that were part of the housing element process or who otherwise engage with the city. We invited them to smaller setting focus group meetings in December and into this month, and we'll continue to, as we will mention later. And we got a lot of feedback, and so I'm just going to go over some of these themes that were discussed in these meetings. First, as you've heard in prior slides, rent increases as a driver of displacement. We also discussed outreach and education on existing laws, especially AB 1482. We heard about the impact of escalating external costs like utilities costs on rents. We heard about the potential relationship between tenant protections and new housing production, or concern about increased tenant protections and maintenance of existing units. We heard about functional evictions, especially those such as evictions or cases where a tenant has had to leave their unit because of a lack of reasonable accommodations for individuals with disabilities, for example. We heard proposals and discussion of relocation assistance and right to return after substantial rehabilitation evictions. We heard about rental registries. We heard about language barriers in outreach and policymaking and how this can detract from our efforts to develop policies that actually benefit the community. We heard about the negative effects of eviction, especially on school-aged children and evictions during the school year. And we heard proposals for rental assistance and mediation as anti-displacement tools. Next slide. I'm going to hand it over to Jennifer to talk about AB 1482.
So throughout this presentation, we have mentioned a lot about AB 1482. So to go more in depth on what the Tenant Protection Act of 2019 covers are rent caps at 5% plus local CPI or 10%, protections for against just cause evictions for tenants living in the unit for at least 1 year, and also documentation requirements for fault evictions, and as well as additional documentation requirements and relocation assistance for no-fault evictions. Soon after, SB 567 was passed, which is an amendment to the Tenant Protection Act. And overall, this just adds more stricter documentation for no-fault evictions, such as owner move-in and substantial remodel.
I'm on. Okay. To further provide the current landscape of tenant protections at the state and city level, I will just go over the 2019 ordinance that the city adopted. Many of you may be familiar with this ordinance or the process that led to this ordinance, much like the process that we're going through now. And these were 3 amendments or additions to the municipal code based on that process. The first is Chapter 7.5. This is the red tag ordinance, or tenants who are displaced from unsafe or substandard units temporarily or permanently. It provides for relocation assistance to those tenants. It provides a right to return to the unit or to an equivalent unit. In Chapter 26, is the condo conversion ordinance. It requires relocation assistance for tenants who are displaced in condo conversion of up to 3 times the current HUD fair market rent, or FMR, and it also provides the right to purchase the unit. In Chapter 27, the city's development code for relocation assistance or relocation allowance. This is for tenants who are displaced due to demolition of their unit or conversion of their unit. The relocation assistance, similarly, must be equivalent to 3 times HUD FMR. Moving costs of up to $1,000 are also provided for the tenant. And there are other requirements on the property owner that are not listed here, but these are the main points. So this is the current status of protections as they are in San Mateo. I'm going to pass it back to Jennifer to talk about what other cities are doing, what we have learned that other cities are pursuing or considering.
So we have discussed about tenant protections and anti-displacement strategies with other jurisdictions throughout San Mateo County and as well as Santa Clara County. And we have listed out various strategies that certain jurisdictions have implemented in order to address housing issues. So for rental assistance, landlord and tenant mediation, and for housing enforcements have been initiatives that cities have implemented to invest in certain programs with community partners in order to mediate with tenants and landlords, or also provide assistance for households who are experiencing financial hardships. And as well as counseling on fair housing laws to further pass affirmative housing. So for AB 1482, this is an enforcement such as providing outreach and education to both tenants and landlords about what AB 1482 covers. And this is not an investment that certain cities have provided, because other community partners have worked on providing outreach, but this is also what a lot of jurisdictions have been focusing on as well. For tenant relocation assistance and right to return policies, these are certain policies that have turned into ordinances for cities to pass. And for data collection, some cities have passed rental registries to collect current data on certain rent and tenancy rates. For rental stabilization, we have learned that not a lot of cities have been discussing about this in our conversations, but it has been an initiative that a lot of cities, other cities in California have passed. And for the purpose of this community workshop, we would like to hear the public's thoughts on the housing issues in San Mateo. And due to the policies that we have shared this evening, we would like to learn if there are any problems that these current protections do not address. But also, we're looking for specific input on the housing element. What are some protections that you would like to see that are expanded with AB 1482? Your thoughts on monitoring rents and displacement, or what overall, what are the outcomes you would like to see?
So to wrap up, what are next steps? There will be no actions taken based on tonight's meeting. This is another listening session for staff to compile and fold into the City Council study session that is planned for March of this year. There we will present City Council with what we have heard and what we've learned. Public comments will still be accepted after tonight's workshop. Here is where you can send them. On the next slide is also contact information, direct contact information for us. There are still opportunities to meet with staff, either in a group setting or one-on-one if desired. We are not scheduling meetings in advance, but if there are groups or individuals who wish to reach out, please do. We will be doing this through mid-February, at which point we will begin preparing the item for City Council. Last slide is how you can get a hold of us. Give us a call or send us an email. Jennifer and I both monitor the housing email. And we look forward to hearing from you in this manner and also this evening. Thank you. That concludes our presentation. I'll hand it back to the chair.
Rachel and Jennifer, thank you very much for the excellent presentation. We appreciate that. So at this point, I will now open it up for public comment to address the questions staff raised in the presentation. So asking Ashley, do we have any hands raised or any folks for public comment?
Yes, we have quite a few in-person speaker slips. If you haven't filled one out and you want to do so now, you can bring it to me. If anybody is online and wants to speak, please raise your hand at this time. Do we have anybody else in the audience that wants to fill out a speaker slip? And anybody else online who wants to speak? You need to raise their hand at this time. Okay. Chair Bowles, we have 22 speakers at this time. Most of them are in chambers and we have one speaker on Zoom. So we're going to be starting with the in-person speakers and the time limit is going to be 1 minute each. For the public commenters who come up and need translation services, they will get double the time to account for the translator, and that time will be on the screen. I'm gonna call like 2 people at once, so I'll say like one name, come up to the mic, and then I'll say who the next person is. So then you're ready to go. after the other person speaks. Okay? All right, so the first public commenter that we have is going to be Krista Hansen. You can come up to the microphone.
Is this on? Good evening.
It's on.
As you know, my name is Krista Hansen. I'm a member of the Peninsula Solidarity Cohort, which represents over 24 different faith traditions united to work to advance social justice in San Mateo County. The Peninsula Solidarity Cohort strongly supports the expansion of protections for renters. Our faith traditions teach us that we are to be judged by how we treat the most vulnerable among us, and many renters in San Mateo lead highly vulnerable lives. 1 in 4 pays more than 50% of income in rent. Renters with lower incomes are at continual risk of eviction, which threatens not only their shelter, but their connections to civic, social, and faith organizations that provide a measure of stability in their lives. Children who experience eviction can suffer protracted emotional, social, and academic harm. Being torn out of school disrupts a child's entire known world, and becoming homeless, which is a real risk of eviction, is even more traumatic.
Thank you.
For
Ms.
these
thank
reasons,
you,
the
Ms. Hansen.
cohort urges the City Council to take meaningful action to keep renters in their homes. And it's an opportunity to demonstrate its commitment to the values that we all share.
Christy,
upholding
your
the
time is
dignity of
up.
human
Hansen.
beings
Thank
and
you.
protecting the innocent among us. And that is it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Claudia Heislop, followed by Penny Nixon.
Hello, thank you for giving me this space. My name is Claudia Heislop. I have lived in San Mateo for a little over 20 years, and I'm a member of One San Mateo. I want to talk a little bit about essential workers. We have many essential workers who live here. They're teachers, medical personnel, government workers, and they tend not to get paid as well as people in the private sector. So these people are usually renters, and it's gotten to the point where a lot of essential workers cannot afford to live in San Mateo. I am an essential worker. I'm a government employee, and I'm hoping to retire sometime next year. I'm going to be 73, and I have 2 choices. I can either keep working or I can move to a place where they have lower housing costs. And I don't like either one of those ideas. I love San Mateo, and I wish I could stay here. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mrs. Heislop.
Penny, you can come up to the mic, and Brian Powdy, you are next.
Good evening. Thank you so much for holding this session. I appreciate your work on this and your deep listening to the stories of San Mateans. I'm hoping that the things that were found and written in the housing element weren't just aspirational, but that actually turn into solid legislation that would give more protections to tenants in the city of San Mateo. We've been, in my opinion, skewed for a long time toward the rights of homeowners. In general, in California, homeowners have about 5 times more rights than tenants. I'm a homeowner myself, and I enjoy many privileges of that, and I would like to see my neighbors have the same privileges and rights that I do. And I would like you to also consider adding an anti-harassment policy into the tenant protections, because I know many stories of tenants that have been harassed because perhaps of their status or other reasons. And I think that's a really important thing to do, as well as a rental registry. Thanks.
Brian Powdy, you're next, and then Carol Eldridge, you're after.
Good evening, Chair Bowles and members of the Community Relations Commission. I ask that you not move forward with any additional tenant protections, as these will be very one-sided and have a punishing effect on housing providers. Our costs for repairs have skyrocketed due to inflation with labor and materials. Our insurance costs have gone through the roof. We are paying much more in premiums and will likely incur much more in expenses due to that were formerly covered by our insurance. And we're also looking at having to spend tens of thousands of dollars to upgrade our units to electrify them. What you're contemplating is burdensome and expensive, and I ask that you stop the war on housing providers. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Carol Eldridge, followed by Rick Bonilla.
Good evening. Yes, my name is Carol Eldridge. I am a member of a community group called One San Mateo, which in turn is a member of a coalition called Our Home San Mateo. This coalition was formed to uphold the interests of renters as the city moves to fulfill its obligation to expand protections under AB 1482, and indeed it is an obligation. One of our proposals is to increase relocation assistance beyond the 1 month that is currently required under AB 1482. 1 month of relocation is nowhere near sufficient to cover the costs associated with a forced move, which can easily exceed $10,000. San Mateo's condo conversion ordinance and demolition ordinance, as Rachel said, already requires 3 months based on fair market rents. They recognize the fact that 1 month is insufficient. So in order to create consistency across the city's ordinances and to provide adequately for renters who are forced to move, we advocate for the increase to 3 months. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Rick Bonilla, followed by John Love.
Thank you very much. And good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. I'm Rick Bonilla. We have needed, and I've been supporting the construction of more housing in San Mateo since before 2001, when I started as a member of the Bay Meadows and Transportation Corridor Citizens Advisory Committee. We built Bay Meadows. It's still being built. Between 2015 and 2022, when I was sitting on this dais tonight, where you sit, I often heard from real estate interests supporting the interests of mom and pop landlords. I'm here tonight to talk with you about mom and pop renters who live in San Mateo. You all know that in order to afford a median one-bedroom apartment in San Mateo, a person needs to earn $62 per hour. The minimum wage in San Mateo at this time is $17.95 per hour. So it's not hard to do that math. Long hours, low pay, multiple jobs, no pension, and no respect. This is the reality for many renters in San Mateo. The city needs to adopt strong measures to enable these people to lead more secure lives. Only asking for security. I strongly urge you to support One San Mateo's raft of urgent renters assistance measures. Just a couple words. Now, before our future and all our futures we depend on each other. And I support that harassment too, anti-harassment. Thanks.
Our next speaker is John Love, followed by Robert Whitehair.
Good evening. My name is John Love. I'm a member of the Social Action Ministry at St. Matthew's Catholic Church. I am a homeowner and resident of San Mateo for the past 22 years. I'm here this evening to express my support for the policies being promoted by Our Home San Mateo campaign, policies that are focused on preventing evictions. Eviction is so much more than a forced move. It can be a life-altering event that does serious damage to families, both emotionally and financially, undermining their prospects for years to come. For children, it is especially traumatizing, often tearing them out of school in the middle of the year and depriving them of the support they receive from neighborhood, church, and school. Not surprisingly, eviction is correlated with the drop in school performance and a rise in adolescent violence. To avoid these traumatic impacts, there are concrete policies the city can adopt. One is to prohibit no-fault evictions during the school year.
Thank you, Mr. Love.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Robert Whitehair, followed by Paula Arello Rosales.
Good evening, Chair, good members of the Commission. Thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Robert Whitehair. I'm co-chair of the San Mateo Climate Action Team. The housing issues that you're addressing tonight help establish an equitable and regenerative approach to the climate polycrisis. Many of us in San Mateo Climate Action Team support fair cost electrification of existing buildings, including helping tenants and landlords of rental properties deal with the very unique challenges faced in rental properties. Others support the city's RHNA targets for deeply affordable housing, extremely low and very low income housing. That's 1,777 units that have to be built in the next 5 years, compared to the very small number of housing units constructed in the last RHNA cycle. This is important. Every tenant evicted is a step backwards in meeting RHNA targets. Tenant protections are a commitment of political leadership through equitable rent protection, reducing the widening climate gap between housing needs and housing availability. Please adopt strong anti-displacement and tenant protection priorities. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Paula Arello Rosales, followed by Elaine Gilbrecht.
Good evening, commissioners and city staff. My name is Paola Arellano Rosales, and I am a staffer with Housing Leadership Council of San Mateo County, who is part of the Our Home San Mateo Coalition. And a part of this coalition, we are committed to defending the rights of renters and advocating for what the community who rents here needs. And I would particularly want to speak in support of a right to return after substantial remodel. Currently, tenants can be evicted under the pretext of a remodel with no guarantee of being able to return once the work is completed. This can cause unnecessary disruption in families and often results in displacement from their homes and their communities. To support tenants' ability to return, landlords could allow a reasonable capped rent increase limited to a certain percentage above the previous rent. This would provide a fair balance, giving landlords a reasonable return while ensuring that displaced family can afford to come back home. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rosales.
Our next speaker is Elaine Gilbrecht, followed by Fernando Pena.
Good evening, commissioners. My name's Elaine Gilbrecht. I'm the executive officer from SAMCAR, the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. And part of our mission is to protect property rights. So this definitely is an issue that we would need to speak about because we're speaking on behalf of the housing providers. I want to thank Jennifer and Rachel for having a meeting with SAMCAR and a Zoom meeting. And one point that we made that day is the only point I'll make right now is more education for everyone on AB 1482 could solve a lot of the problems. There's already tenant protections in place through 1482. So we're opposed to expanding that, but we are in favor of more education. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Fernando Pena, followed by Marina Van Blumenstein.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Fernando Pena. I'm the Government Affairs Director at the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. I'm here in opposition to the inclusion of these policies in the housing element. But first, I'd like to thank the speakers who are sharing their difficult stories that we're hearing this evening. SAMCAR is committed to addressing many of these complaints, even though you're hearing from a small handful of people in a city of 100,000, one complaint is one too many. I am respectfully requesting, however, that you ask staff to provide directions on resources that are already available to the community here in San Mateo County and education on the state laws that already address these matters. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Marina Van Blumenstein, followed by Brendan Aiello.
Hi, my name is Marina Van Blumenstein. I am here to oppose any actions which will impose any additional restrictions on landlords, any expansions to AB 1482. As you all know, we had Proposition, I believe it was 33, in which we, the voters, voted against the expansion of local rent controls by about 60% to 40%. You seem to be ignoring the fact that that's what we voted for. I am opposed to any subsidies that would be from the city as a San Mateo resident. I am opposed to a registry. I am opposed to anything that puts more restrictions on landlords. And yes, when tenants are evicted, their children suffer, but when landlords don't get paid, their children suffer. They still have to make their mortgage payments, et cetera. It's a two-way street. And I will be expanding my comments to you via email. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is Brendan Aiello, followed by Lee Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody. I am Brendan Aiello. I am a lifelong resident of San Mateo and a product of our public schools. I will say, just to address specific topics on your guys' report, as far as the rent registry and data regarding it, there is already privatized and government data on regional information from places like HUD or CoStar, where you can get information like that. I also will address that the state and local San Mateo government has addressed this as a supply issue, and the more red tape and the more restrictions that we get, hurt Measure T that we just passed, hurt the quotas that the state is trying to put on us on developing. For instance, if you have a single family house and you want to put 3 houses on one lot, and you have to evict someone to do that, it's going to cost and be factored in, and it's going to make the deal even pencil out even less. And then when someone is trying to sell or rent and make that decision to sell or rent, it's most likely going to be sell if there's going to be more red tape. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Ayala.
Our next speaker is Lee Ginsburg, followed by Ted McKinnon.
Hello. Hi. First, I want to, in your research, you talked about foreclosures and due to non-payment. The dates you used were just, they're all during COVID. They were just not related to real life. So I would just tell you to cancel that and then refresh that. Is that during COVID, some people were allowed to not pay rent if they filled out the application, but a lot chose not to fill out the application and still didn't pay rent. So totally wrong numbers to be working with. I'm against almost any your enlarged restrictions on rent control and just cause. I do believe, as Elaine mentioned, education on both sides is important, but more fees that you add, more restrictions you add to the landlord, that will be adding to the cost and raising rents. I'm not sure if you realize that probably about 75% of the properties rented are owned by mom and pop landlords. Have worked very, very hard to own these properties. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ginsburg.
Our next speaker is Ted McKinnon, followed by John Ebnetter.
Good evening to Chair Bowles and Commissioners. My name is Ted McKinnon. I'm a 26-year resident in San Mateo, a homeowner living in District 5. I'm a member of One San Mateo, and I'm supporting the changes set forth by the Our Home San Mateo campaign. A very important change we're advocating for is to start just cause for eviction protection from day one of tenancy. If tenants are complying with their lease, shouldn't they be entitled to stay? Shouldn't there always be a just cause for eviction? We believe the answer to both of these questions is yes. Extending just cause to day one is an important and concrete step the city can take to prevent displacement and keep renters in their homes. It is also fair. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Mr. McKinnon.
Our next speaker is John Ebnetter, followed by Mitch Spiegel.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you for all of your dedication to the city. The City of San Mateo is obligated to protect all its residents, and that includes renters. To do that, we need to start with impartial data about the current rental conditions in the City of San Mateo. This data is not available today. The lack of information has hindered public dialogue and functioned as an impediment in the evaluation of current housing issues. If we don't know how big a problem is, where it is happening, or how many families are affected, then we have no way to begin the critical work of finding equitable solutions. A rental registry would provide comprehensive, reliable data to help craft good public policy on housing. The value of data cannot be overstated. I can't imagine any reasonable reason not to collect it. the inexpensive, unobtrusive, and efficient use of rental registries by local cities such as Palo Alto, Half Moon Bay, Concord, and El Cerrito point to the support of balanced tenants' rights. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mitch Spiegel, followed by Kathy Zemay.
Hello, I appreciate the time tonight. My name is Mitch Spiegel. I rent in District 5. I wanted to say I appreciate staff for sharing that 70% of evictions, far and above the lion's share of evictions, are from non-payment of rent. We need to focus our precious tax dollars on the most impactful area that will help the most people, and that's city-funded rental assistance. I'd also like to ask the committee to see how they plan to make sure they are getting accurate data. It's important that we understand the local data, not county data, not Redwood City or Half Moon Bay data, but folks that really live in San Mateo. I've also seen advertisements online, and you guys may have seen the same, for paying people to speak tonight in another event. I feel that as a community, we should know who has been paid to speak here tonight and what organization is paying them if we're going to get accurate data on the problem at hand. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kathy Zemay, followed by Rovi Lynn Antonio.
Hello. Thank you for listening to all sides. I am on the side of the landlord. I am a landlord. I have been for a long time.
Can you pull the microphone closer, please?
Yeah, sure. Forgot where I was. Thank you. I am a landlord and I have a lot of tenants, and my tenants love me and I love them. And this all I find very baffling, because when we have issues, we talk, we come up with solutions, and we all work together. And I don't know what landlords are doing, and I don't know what tenants are doing, but somebody's doing it wrong, and it's time to start getting it right. And the only way to get it right is that we come together to a table when there are issues, educate, communicate, and not put the weight of the housing crisis on the back of mom and pop landlords. It's starting to just hurt. It's hurting a lot. So thank you for your time.
Our next speaker is Rovi Lynn Antonio, followed by Mark Soper.
Good evening, Commissioners. Rovi Lynn Antonio with the California Apartment Association. We represent rental property owners and operators here in the city of San Mateo. It's important to recognize and acknowledge that the housing providers are part of this community as well. They provide both service and a commodity to renters in San Mateo. Housing providers can agree that renters who are having a hardship should be helped. However, that help shouldn't come at the expense of the housing providers, especially when it affects their livelihood. Staff should do everything they can to pursue solutions that don't have a negative impact on the community. And since this is a community workshop, there should be an effort made to engage with housing providers on the hardships that they're experiencing of providing housing for renters in San Mateo. And it should also include a slide of all the dozens of other laws that protect renters right now, especially from harassment, such as harassment for changing the locks at will, calling ICE, threatening deportation, and ignoring requests for habitability repairs. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Mark Soper, followed by Jessica Vacetta.
Chair, Council, good evening. Mark Soper, born in San Mateo, raised 4 children here, 12 grandchildren, and I am protesting anything that even appears to make our community the way it's looking. I think the solutions are in transportation, bullet trains from Sacramento, Hollister, Stockton, as opposed to cramming our quality of life with this traffic and low-cost income coming into our neighborhoods, impacting what used to be a great place to live. For the first time, I'm actually thinking of relocating, and a lot of that has to do with government interference in things that should be left as between private parties. So I'm definitely registering in opposition to anything that has to do with more restraints and should look to better solutions for housing, which I think we could look to Japan. Bullet trains, I think, are the solution, not packing more people into our area. Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jessica Vaqueta, followed by Alvaro Duran.
Good evening. My name is Reverend Jessica Vaqueta, and I am the senior minister at the Congregational Church of San Mateo. Thank you for your time tonight. I have been a resident of San Mateo a little over a year. I do rent, and I have been a renter my entire adult life because as a clergy person, I have not had the liberty to, or the ability to afford my own home. I am here as our church is, as part of the Our Home San Mateo Coalition. And my colleague Alvaro Duran will be speaking more to some of the proposals that this organization is working on, including the immediate just cause protections, restrict no-fault evictions during the school year, right of return after major renovations, increased relocation payments, and real estate data recording system. As a renter, I have had to deal with many of these things in my life. I have been scared to speak up for my rights, and I am a person of privilege. I am a person who has proper paperwork, and I know many of my fellow San Mateonians do not have that. So please consider these proposals. Thank you.
Our last in-person speaker is going to be Alvaro Duran.
Good evening, members of the commission and public present here, neighbors of San Mateo. I'm Reverend Alvaro Duran, the Minister of Community Life of the Congregational Church of San Mateo, and one of the people that have been working in our Home San Mateo campaign. I want to share with you first that I believe that the right to this home must prevail because it's a human right. People's dignity is not a business, and it's the city's responsibility to protect and to promote people's dignity and people's rights. Our campaign is proposing immediate just cause protections, restrict no-fault evictions during the school year, right of return after major renovations, as some of my colleagues have expressed before, increased relocation payments, and real estate data recording system. The implementation of a system, this is the city's responsibility. And organizations working in the city of San Mateo have recorded many things that will be of help, but it's the city's responsibility. Thank you.
Chair Bowles, we're now moving to our two Zoom speakers. Lori Watanuki, you can go ahead and unmute.
Hello?
Oh, it looks like, I'm so sorry, Jeff Lamont is speaking now. You can go ahead and speak.
Okay, all right, great. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this evening. So I am a longtime resident of San Mateo and have been a housing provider in the past. And I'm speaking in opposition to all of the proposals I've been putting out today to the committee. I think one of the things that needs to be emphasized is education. We do have statewide rent control with AB 1482. And, we don't support bad actors. We want to do what we can from preventing this from happening. But, there's something called natural occurring affordable housing. And so, the overwhelming owners of housing in San Mateo are mom and pop operators. And these proposals will penalize them. Furthermore, Measure Q failed in 2016 by over 60% of the vote. The voters put that down for rent control, and Prop 33. So, when are people going to start to, take into account that the constituents have been voting against these measures time after time and stop pressuring the housing providers into these odious proposals that are being put forth this evening? Thank you for your time.
Lori Watanuki, you can go ahead and unmute.
Thank you for the unmute button. Madam Chair and members of the Community Relations Commission, my name is Lori Watanuki and I live in District 3. As a small property owner, I think more common sense solutions rather than penalizing the good landlords who maintain their properties and charge fair, affordable rental prices. The city of San Mateo needs to create the stopgap fund with grants versus funding legal aid. We do not want the city to create a divide between renters and property owners. Rent control does not provide more affordable housing. It will do the opposite, since there are already rental restrictions on properties that are over 15 years old. If 85% of these cases are due to non-payment of rent, you will find many property owners who work with tenants, and each situation is different. So why are you penalizing the small property owner? Paying $9,000 relocation for a $3,000 rental is a very heavy burden. Rental registry creates privacy issues for owners.
Thank you, Mrs. Watanuki.
A balanced approach to making this more difficult, enforcing more restrictions on small property.
Thank you, Lori.
Thank you.
We do have one last speaker, Sal. You can go ahead and unmute.
Yes, hi, my name is Sal Kumar, and I am against this. I think what we need to do is not become like San Francisco. I think the overall consensus is there's a lot of good people who are trying to help out, who are small landlords who are looking out for the good, and they're not gouging and taking advantage of people. I think what the city needs to do is not go the route of San Francisco. And I see a lot of things that the city of my beautiful city of San Mateo is doing that is lining up to be like San Francisco. And I hope that doesn't happen. I hope you guys do not pass this. And I hope the best. And there are better solutions out there, but I do not believe that this is the correct way to go. That's it.
Chair Bowles, we have no more public commenters at this time.
Thank you so much. So seeing no additional speakers, I will now close the public comment session. At this point, before I turn it over to my colleagues for discussion or any questions, I just wanted to thank all of you for coming out tonight to take the time to share your concerns. Also those who called in and also on Zoom, we appreciate the feedback, especially from the diversity that we received today from renters, right, landlords, faith-based groups, industry. So we do appreciate your feedback, and definitely we'll take that into consideration. So at this point, I am going to open it up to my colleagues to see if they have any comments.
I have a quick question / comment. And first, to echo Chair Bowles's thoughts about appreciating all the diversity of responses, and really appreciate the respect that everyone has shown to each other, even though we're all coming from different perspectives. It's nice to have a reasonable discourse. My question for the staff, and if someone in the room would like to address it, if you have specific knowledge of this, is the shortfall in AB 1482 being implemented. We've heard that there isn't necessarily awareness of it, and it's not applied or being taken advantage of by renters throughout the city. Do we have any information to quantify that or understand where the shortfalls are?
The short answer is no. We can't really quantify it because we don't know the number of cases where a provision of AB 1482 would have been in play, right? We don't know when a tenant or a landlord could have used AB 1482, but maybe if I expand a little bit on what we heard and what we may be hearing from the public about why it's, we'll say, underutilized in some cases, right? It's because it's a state law And this happens with state laws at the local level. When the rubber hits the road, if there isn't an entity enforcing that law proactively, if there's no effort to inform, then the law may go underutilized in some cases. AB 1482 is a fairly well-known law, I would say, certainly among property owners, landlords, and so I think what we have been hearing is we want to make sure that tenants are aware of what is in AB 1482, and also that that landlords are aware. So if it is relevant for any reason, for any of the provisions, that it actually is properly utilized. I don't want to say more than that because again, we don't know the specific cases where it didn't, where it could have played a role but didn't, right? So it's really hard to say definitively, but except that in our experience, just locally, when we're implementing state law, sometimes this happens, something is lost in translation, right? And so we need, and that's why we've seen some cities invest in partnerships with local organizations who can assist tenants and landlords, for example.
Thank you.
First of all, I really want to thank everybody who's here, coming out on a night and listening to what each other has to say, different points of view. Our city needs to be able to have a wide range of vibrant, housing that allows people of many different types of income to have a place to live. We have made it so difficult for our renters to be here. It is now almost impossible for a person to come into San Mateo unless they are, multiple families in a house, working 3 jobs. What we're addressing here kind of chips away at some of the issues, but we have a much larger issue of housing affordability. And we as a city need to be attacking that and doing things that change the situation. And listening to what people are saying, I know that with landlords, and I'm from a family that has been landlords, and you do run into situations where it can be very difficult to be a landlord. But at the same time, our tenants should have rights. This is their home. Somebody owns their home besides them, but it's their home, and they need to have rights. So things like relocation, the tenant relocation payments and paying them for someone who's been there less than a year. To me, it makes very little sense that if I've been there 10 months, I don't get paid. If I've been there 13 months, I get paid. And it can also become an incentive to displace a renter before you hit the 1-year mark. So, to me, that makes a lot of good sense. And I don't understand how that is an additional expense to landlords. I would love to hear some explanation of why that should not be. Secondly, with the rental registry, there's been positive and negatives expressed about it. I would like to have our staff give us better information. A number of other cities have rental registries. What is it costing that city to create the registry, to maintain the registry? Is it a small cost? Is it a large cost? Are there a lot of difficulties in it? What benefits have other cities seen from actually implementing it? That's important information that we need to have to be able to make a decision on establishing something like this. Overall, when I look at what is being proposed here, I don't see a lot of new costs for landlords when they're operating their properties in the way that they should be. I know it's always difficult when there's something that could impinge on the landlord's ability to run their properties and to do this properly. But if someone could explain to me, why these are financially onerous, that would be very much appreciated. And again, really want to thank everyone for coming out. It takes an effort. It is a lot of work, a lot of organizing that goes into this. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Commissioner Nugent. Any other comments?
A couple questions for staff. Realizing that in response to my colleague's question earlier that we don't necessarily have the data on where the shortfalls are of AB 1482, kind of wondering how we landed on these particular policies for the expansion, the housing element then. For example, how did we land on provisions to require tenant relocation payments for no-fault evictions for those with tenure less than 1 year, unless there was data to show that there are no-fault evictions that are happening in less than 1 year, right? We must have come up with these policies in a certain way in the housing element. So just a question for staff on that.
Thank you, Commissioner Kim. The policies that are in the housing element were first drafted years ago now, at the beginning of the housing element drafting process, and were the result of a community process that was like this one, but much bigger because it encompassed more than just anti-displacement and tenant protections. And then they were refined over several revisions and iterations of the housing element before it was ultimately given the check of approval from the Department of Housing and Community Development, HCD. So to answer your question, those specific areas of AB 1482 came from the public identifying these needs through, and so not just one meeting, not just two meetings, but many public meetings, and came from the city working with HCD on what is there to work with if we are interested in that third P of production, preservation, and protection. What is going on in other cities, that what is in their dialogue about this issue? And so that's where that conversation started, and then it ultimately landed on strengthening these aspects of AB 1482. So we struggle with having adequate data. We have struggled with having adequate data throughout, not just this process or the housing element process, with the process that I mentioned before that led to the 2019 ordinance. This is sort of an ongoing challenge, and there have been different proposals on how to deal with that problem. But yes, I don't think it would be accurate to say that there are robust data on exactly those points.
Great. Thank you. I just want to comment to the group that's here in the audience here tonight. Thank you for being here. I think the reason why our commission in particular is hosting this is because our purpose is to hear from and serve the populations most in need in San Mateo. And for that reason, housing is very much related to that. And that's why our commission is the one that's listening to the public comments here. And I think we've heard plenty from our renters and how much they are in need at this point and why these protections would mean so much. It's not lost on me, though, that we have heard from mom and pop landlords. I think that the need for education goes both ways, not just for renters who should know about their protections, but also for landlords to know whether and how burdensome these tenant protections might seem. Because I'm reading through the language of this and amending the code to strengthen enforcement penalty structure to aid in protecting tenants only from unsafe or substandard units that wouldn't necessarily be a burden if that landlord has a safe or standard unit, right? So I think to the extent possible and before the city council meeting in March, where this is really going to be discussed further, I think just additional data and education would be beneficial to both groups that are here tonight. I also think that hearing data about precedents of similar ordinances in our neighboring cities, I think that would be beneficial. If there are cities who are running rental registries, it would be beneficial to hear how much is it actually helping renters? Is it actually a burden for landlords? Because if it is, that's something that we need to discuss, and not having that data and kind of going off of these policies that we don't see in action is a difficult thing to do. So to that extent, in the next couple of months, we can ask for that data, see precedents in other neighboring cities, to the extent that we can educate both renters and landlords about the actual potential impacts of these ordinances. I think that would be really beneficial. But again, thank you for everyone for being here tonight.
There were a couple things that impressed me tonight, and that as we're looking at this, landlords and tenants aren't necessarily opposed to each other. They often have very much the same goals. We as a city need to be helping our landlords, giving them the tools to effectively provide housing, make it so it's affordable for landlords to provide housing. So it's not just a one-sided issue. It's we have to be helping the whole situation so that we can encourage landlords to keep their properties up, provide ways to help them do that, provide ways to expand properties. The root issue underneath all of this, we don't have enough housing. We can talk about, well, let's close the doors and, if we could get rid of a few people. But I don't think that's realistic. I don't think that's going to happen. It hasn't been in the past, and there's no place ever that has really worked. So what we can do to help tenants, to help landlords, it's a city responsibility. And I am very pleased that San Mateo and our staff is working in that direction. Thank you so much.
Sometimes when you get to talk last, you just get to say, thank you, everyone, for saying a lot of the things that I wanted to say. So I echo the commission's gratitude in having you all come out tonight. It's very cold out, and it's not often that we get a lot of public comment in our meetings. And so it's really nice to be able to see faces and interact with people and hear all of your diverse opinions. So thank you so much for joining us this evening. I think I just wanted to echo a little bit about what was saying about just some data. Looking at, we've looked at what the other cities are doing, but we didn't really discuss kind of the effectiveness of what some of them are doing, kind of like how is the registry maintained? Is there a cost component to it? How are mediations going? How are they doing outreach and education? So I just think moving forward for staff, I would just love to see more detail about how those things are working. But thank you again, everyone.
Thank you to my fellow commissioners for their comments and their questions. It looks like we have a lot of homework and research to do, but this is certainly a good learning process, I think, for me and for all of us. So at this point, we're going on to reports and announcements, and wanted to check with my colleagues to see if they have any announcements or reports to share. Okay, I actually have one announcement.
So I just wanted to let people know and to kind of save the date that the City of San Mateo is holding a train horn noise community meeting on Thursday, January 30th, 6 p.m. here in the council chambers. There will be, of course, city staff here, but as well as representatives from Caltrain on hand. So definitely encourage you to attend that.
Staff does have one reminder for the commission. The city clerk's office sent out a survey to all of you. Hopefully you received it. It came from our colleague, I believe from her email address, Chantal Eaton at cityofsanmateo.org. That is a legitimate email with a SurveyMonkey link. And they would love it if the clerk's office would love it if you could please take that survey on. That would be very helpful to them. So I just wanted to just give a little tickle, I think they say, poke, to encourage you to take that survey. That's all.
Thank you, Rachel. So if there is nothing more for the commission tonight, may I hear a motion to adjourn? Second?
Second.
Okay, so this meeting is now adjourned. Thanks.